Okay, well, let's get started. Thank you for taking the time to join us today, and welcome. And we have a very valuable update and information and some additional education on biodiesel, renewable diesel, some new and upcoming funding incentives, and also talking about some bio-based products that you may not even know you could be using today. I will be your host, Stephen Levy. I've been involved with Clean Cities for a few decades now, and involved with a few as they began. I'm a past president of the Empire Clean Cities and a current board member, and a past governing chair of the National Biodiesel Board, and managing director at Sprague Energy. This is going to be a fun hour for us and for me, as we have some great speakers to share with you their expertise on both their experience with biodiesel and renewable diesel, and as well as with Jill Hamilton talking about different incentives that are involved coming out of Washington today for both infrastructure and for equipment. As most of you know, biodiesel has been used and consumed for a couple of decades here in the United States as a clean, viable fuel and an abundance of it. Renewable diesel is a little new, mostly being consumed on the West Coast for several reasons, which we will talk about. And to give us a better idea of where we are with both biodiesel and renewable first, Joy from Empire Clean Cities and Rita from Greater Long Island Clean Cities will give us an overview. Joy and Rita?
Thanks, Steve. And this is our, I guess, the first slide. Welcome to our webinar. Thank you. Clean Cities. Clean Cities is a program of the U.S. Department of Energy. There are over 90 coalitions throughout the country, and they're run differently. Some are nonprofit, some are state or university run. Clean Cities, National Clean Cities helps to deploy nearly 1 million of alternative fuel vehicles. And there are 6 coalitions in New York State. GLIC represents Nassau and Suffolk counties. There are, like I said, there are 6 coalitions in New York State: Buffalo, Rochester, Central New York, Capital District, New York City, and Lower Hudson Valley. Next slide. What do? We provide education and outreach to decision makers in fleets, public and private. We offer alternative fuel planning support, training, and access to technical assistance. We identified funding and incentive opportunities. We connect fleets with alternative fuel providers, industry partners, and resources. A big part of our coalition is education. We'd like to educate everyone on alternative fuels and how it can be put into their fleets. We collect data and analyze regional data, support alternative fuel corridor planning. We do many different things on topics, but first I'd say just reach out to your local coalition. Next slide. The basis of what is biodiesel. Feedstock, vegetable oils, yellow grease used in cooking oils, tallow. It transfers the oil or fat into, it is reacted with a short chain alcohol, use methanol, usually methanol, and the catalysis. And usually sodium hydroxide or rarely potassium hydroxide. Biodiesel is a fatty acid methanol or FAME. Next slide. Soybean production in New York State. There's about 60 to 70% of U.S. vegetable oil-based biofuels are currently generated from soybean oil. While New York State is not home to any biodiesel refineries, it is regionally important imported producers of soybeans. New York New York soybean farmers produce about 477,360 tons of soybeans on 312,000 acres of farmland in 2020, more than any other Northeast state. Soybean production contributes more than 160 million to the New York State economy annually. So it's a bigger part of our industry. Next. The basics. What is renewable diesel? Renewable diesel is distinct from biodiesel. Renewable hydrocarbon biofuels, also called green or drop-in biofuels, are fuels produced from biomass sources through a variety of biological, thermal, and chemical process. Chemically identical to petroleum, gasoline, diesel, or jet fuel. It meets the same ASTM fuel quality standards as petroleum fuels they replace. These biofuels can be used in existing engines and infrastructure. Next. In this chart, just going to give a quick overview. The bio blend and specifications, I'm not going to go into it totally, but this presentation will be on both our website, the Greater Long Island Clean Cities.com, and also Empire Clean Cities. Next.
Okay, thanks, Rita. I think
yes, sorry, Joy.
Okay.
Back to Joy. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. I'm Joy Gardner from Empire Clean Cities. Like Rita said, we'll be sharing these slides after the fact, but just to give a quick overview, biodiesel is typically blended. You can have pure B100 biodiesel, though typically you should check with your engine warranty to make sure that the vehicles are B100 compatible. Otherwise, the standard is a blend typically of B20, which is 20% biodiesel and 80% diesel. And we also have some lower level blends as well. Again, for these B20 and below, generally there's no need to check your vehicle, your engine warranty, that they typically are compatible. Again, they're with renewable diesel, there's generally also no need to change out the vehicle itself, but you should check your warranty. Some of the bigger, if you have, especially for folks who operate diesel trucks, some of the big OEMs like Volvo and Mack have stated that no modifications are needed for renewable diesel, which is what makes biodiesel and renewable diesel such great options for fleets who are looking to reduce their emissions and save on diesel fuel costs without having to replace the entire vehicle. So these are great interim choices for folks on their journey to a zero emission fleet. So there are a number of vehicle applications for both bio and renewable diesel. On the light duty side, any trucks or passenger cars or personally owned vehicles that run on diesel can operate on a biodiesel blend or renewable diesel. On the medium duty side, same thing with vans and shuttles, airports, and some larger taxi fleets. For heavy duty, this is a great option for school and transit buses. I know that there is a ton of incentives out there and coming down the pipeline for zero emission vehicles, and we are big fans of those, but we also know that they come with a hefty price tag. So again, these are really good options to immediately reduce your vehicle emissions and improve air quality in your area without having to swap out your vehicles. And again, same thing with short and long haul delivery trucks, bucket trucks, street sweepers. Again, anything that currently runs on diesel, petroleum, and we're seeing more and more applications for fuels every day. So engine compatibility, like I mentioned, really you should check with your engine warranty manufacturer before for higher level blends of biodiesel. It could affect it, and so just double check before you switch over. Here are a couple of great resources that you can take a look at and that we'll send around with this presentation. And if you have any questions at all, you're welcome to reach out to your Clean Cities coordinator. You can also check with your fuel provider, and they should be able to find that answer for you as well. So here are some of the sort of benefits and considerations for switching to biodiesel on your step to a sustainable fleet. As Rita mentioned earlier, it's produced domestically, and so it brings in jobs to the region, and not only in biodiesel production, but also to local agriculture. It reduces greenhouse gas emissions. It's non-toxic, non-corrosive, and non-carcinogenic. It improves fuel lubricity and raises the CO2 level of the fuel itself. And it's less combustible than petroleum diesel. And just anecdotally, it smells a lot nicer when it comes out of the tailpipe. And some people have even referred to it as smelling like French fries. Some considerations that I've mentioned before, again, just make sure that it's compatible with your engine warranty. As we'll hear a little bit later on from the fleet perspective, with some of the higher blends of biodiesel, there can be some gelling or freezing in colder temperatures. And so we see some fleets drop to a B5 or a B10 over the winter months, and then go back up to the higher blends during the warmer times of year. Another consideration is the availability of renewable diesel. Of course, we'll talk a little bit about this later on in the presentation, but renewable diesel is available more on the West Coast, where they have a low carbon fuel standard. And so until volumes can reach a level that it's economical for them to bring renewable diesel here, it might be a bit expensive for a little bit longer. Some of the environmental benefits, it reduces life cycle greenhouse gases by up to 86%. And 50 to 85% lower carbon intensity for renewable diesel than diesel fuel on its own. We're seeing lower particulate matter, which reduces smog and makes our air healthier to breathe, which also means fewer trips to the hospital for folks with asthma, just a more pleasant experience outside. And this is important for all vehicles that operate on diesel, but we find this particularly important when we're talking about school buses. When school buses are sitting there waiting to pick up kids, and they're just pumping diesel fumes and particulate matter into the air. There's a number of studies that talk about the effects of vehicle emissions on test scores, on asthma rates, and the overall health and well-being of children. And so by switching to biodiesel, or including biodiesel and renewable diesel in your sustainability plans, you can see a dramatic drop in both of those. Availability. So these are sort of screenshots from the Alternative Fuel Data Center that's populated by the US Department of Energy and the Clean Cities Coalitions. There are about 617 and counting public and private stations across the country. And on the right side, you can kind of see the number of stations by state. We do have some in New York City and in the downstate region. However, if you are interested in purchasing biodiesel, then you can reach out to your Clean Cities coordinator, and we can help identify a station near you, or we can help connect you with a fuel provider. You can also talk with your current fuel provider. They may be able to provide you with a biodiesel blend. In a lot of cases too, it's also best to buy your biodiesel pre-blended. That way you don't risk contamination and that the ratio is right and again falls in line with your vehicle warranty. Finally, if you are a fleet on the call and you are considering biodiesel and you are considering a biodiesel fueling facility, private facility for your fleet, there are a couple of different options, both underground storage tanks and above ground storage tanks that depending on your location and the size of your fleet, as well as the climate that you're in. They for underground tanks allow for some colder temperature, while above ground tanks you might not work as well for higher blends. But again, happy to talk about that in more detail. Feel free to reach out to Rita or I, and we can help you figure out what is best for your fleet. So here are a number of different resources that dive into this information in greater detail, including some vehicle searches for vehicles that can run on biodiesel and renewable diesel, station locators, and some laws and incentives. We'll send this around and you can click around at your leisure. And if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out. And you can reach us here. Here's our contact information for both Empire Clean Cities, which is New York City and the Lower Hudson Valley, and Greater Long Island Clean Cities, which is Nassau and Suffolk County and Long Island.
Joy, Rita, thank you very much. And a reminder to everyone that the presentation will be available, and Rita and Joy and everyone on the presentation today is available to answer any of the questions that you might have. But most importantly too, publicly want to thank Rita and Joy for everything they do as Clean Cities coordinators for us every day, and keeping the Clean Cities going and being very productive and advantageous to all of our stakeholders as well. So thank you. And I think everybody felt it was informative to really see the differences between biodiesel and renewable diesel. Some people get a little confused today, although they use the same types of feedstocks, they are produced differently and have different applications. And it's very important to know the differences between the two. And one person that definitely knows the differences between the two, and who I'm proud to introduce, who really doesn't need an introduction, is Keith Kerman. And Keith, I know everybody's going to be interested to hear what you have to say, but I think everyone should also know that in addition to Keith's everyday duties at the City of New York as Deputy Commissioner and Chief Fleet Officer at DCAS, which I'm sure not everybody knows, but DCAS stands for the Department of Citywide Administrative Services. Keith has impressively created a pathway for the city's use of biodiesel and hopefully sometime in the future renewable diesel as well, and has successfully demonstrated renewable diesel for the city fleet. So without further ado, Mr. Keith Kerman. Keith?
Okay, thank you, Stephen. And thank you, Joy and Rita. Good to be with you. We've been working together for a long time, probably 20 years on fueling, and since 2005 when we launched biodiesel at Parks. And it's just grown from there. So thank you for all of that. And of course, we've had a great relationship with Empire Clean Cities, pushing sustainability on all fronts. And, you know, while the world's environmental issues are extraordinarily challenged, I don't think there's ever been more momentum on the transportation side across all platforms than there is today. And so, you know, that's good news. The challenge is pretty serious too. So really quickly, we're New York City Fleet. We're the largest municipal fleet in the United States. It's 30,000 vehicles, add in 10,700 school buses, which we've been partnering with. It's a pretty big fleet. It's, you know, obviously the sanitation department, police department, the fire department are our most well-known brands, but we serve 50 different agencies across New York City government that are doing work 24/7, 365 to help New York City, progress. So under Mayor de Blasio, we have established very ambitious environmental goals. 50% greenhouse gas reduction by 2025, not far from now. A long-term goal of an all-electric fleet, and currently that's 2040. I could imagine that coming even sooner. And then we have a three-part kind of plan. Someone's got their mic live. We kind of have a three-part plan as to how we're proceeding with sustainability. And I want to mention all aspects of it, and then I'm going to focus on our work on biofuel. First plan is electrify where you can. And we've seen a lot of progress on that front. And really, just in the last few years, electrification is taking off. And where you can do zero emission vehicles and make them work and be reliable, we want to do that. And we're going to have more to say publicly on that pretty soon. We still adopt hybrid vehicles, right? Where you can't go all electric, a hybrid is still a very efficient way to save maintenance costs, reduce fuel costs, make a vehicle quieter. And it can be used in conjunction with biodiesel. So if you see that lovely Parks garbage truck, right? That is a hybrid garbage truck, a 6-yard packer that also uses biodiesel. So you can combine these approaches. And of course it has the DPFs and the diesel treatment at the exhaust. So you really have 3 different environmental beneficial things going on at the same time. Interesting note, all our ambulances in New York City government now, which are all using biodiesel, are also hybrid electric. They have an alternative power unit. So every ambulance is a fully operative hybrid system, has a plug-in capacity, a little bit challenging to plug in an ambulance. So we're getting that aspect fully realized is going to take some time. And of course, it's using biodiesel blends. And then the police department, we're going to all hybrid electric police cars now until we get to all electric police cars. And if you watch the press, there might have been something out there in the news on that in the last few days, and we probably have some more to say on that soon. The third strategy is biofuels. And we've been using biofuels successfully since 2005 when we launched it at Parks. We'll talk more about the scale, but we have so much trucking, sanitation department, 2,200 garbage trucks, the fire department trucks, 5,000 off-road units from agricultural tractors to backhoes to front-end loaders, list goes on and on. The reality is, whatever we all hope, we're going to be using diesel fuel in this existing infrastructure for a while. And a while can be 10 years, 15 years, whatever more. But we all know there's an enormous amount of existing infrastructure and it uses and depends on diesel fuel. And we want to make it the cleanest possible diesel fuel and the best possible diesel fuel until such time as if we can get to zero emission everywhere, we will. But until we get there, we want to use renewable fuels. And of course, then the heating oil as well. We actually use more heating oil than we use vehicle fuel. 15 million gallons of diesel a year on fleet, 25 to 30, depending on how cold the winter is, on heating oil. So that's actually a bigger opportunity market. This is how we began, actually a donation of B100 in the Parks Department in 2005. And this is where we are now. And just the last, I don't know how many listed up, maybe 9 fiscal years, we've used 376 million blended gallons of biofuels in both heating and fleet. And both of these are legislated programs. By law, we use biofuel in all our trucks. Emergency services is exempted, interesting enough, and I have another slide on that, but all our police, fire, and correction are all using biofuels voluntarily. The law exempts them, but they're using them. And then by law, not just city buildings, but all buildings in New York City must use B5. We're pushing further ahead on that, but an enormous amount of blended fuel being used, a lot of it supplied, a huge percentage of it supplied by Sprague. And as well as others, and very successfully, right? We couldn't get through one day if we were having operational problems at this scale with biofuels in all our trucks and all our buildings. So you can feel comfortable that this fuel is going to work. On the fleet program, we've made a lot of progress in increasing the blends and making sure that as much of our fuel has biofuel in it as possible. We still have a few exemptions, usually where there are building emergency generators that are coterminous with fleet fueling facilities, but more or less we're using biodiesel almost everywhere, including off-road equipment. Here's on all the different agencies, and just in the time certainly that I've been here at DCAS, major increase, especially in emergency services. Like I mentioned before, emergency services are exempt in the law, but we've seen huge increases. Department of Correction went from 16% to 96%. The fire department did not use biodiesel when I showed up here a little while ago. Now 77% of all their fuel is biofuel. Police department, 85% from 0%. Sanitation parks have always been great at 100%. So really every agency buying in, including the agencies that, don't necessarily have to at least by law. Few things about just fleets and biofuels. So while there are lots of things that go into maintenance rates and fleet service rates, and I'm not going to say biofuel is the singular issue, it certainly isn't. The fact of the matter is our out of service rates have been getting better as we have grown biofuel. So to the extent you're worried about servicing in vehicles and whether they're compatible, we have better maintenance, and we have not had maintenance problems with biofuels, but our servicing's improved. As we've grown biodiesel, servicing has gotten better. We, of course, monitor price. All diesel fuel and fuel prices are going up. We all know that. We've seen a little bit more of a delta with biofuels and regular fuels recently. So, we are concerned about that and need to monitor that. Certainly to the extent, and obviously it's beyond all of our powers, but to the extent that liquid fuel prices are increasing in general, and obviously we all know they are, that will push the topic for electric and hybrids, and that it's just natural. So hopefully we'll see that decrease, and we're obviously always monitoring the delta between biofuels and regular fuels as well. I mentioned heating oil. My day job is fleet, but we're also pushing heavily on heating oil. So the first thing we're doing, all of New York City by 2025 has to go to B10 in heating oil. We're trying to be well ahead of that curve. So we're already at 75% of all our buildings are at B10. And we are looking, especially with the Department of Ed, which is our biggest fueling heating oil customer by far, we are looking at how that could grow even more, right? Could we use really substantial blends, maybe even a B100 in heating oil in buildings? So we're looking at that question as we go system-wide to B10, and I think it's 2035 for the whole city to be at B20, where we don't have a set date yet, but we're going to be there way before everybody else. We want to get B10 locked in, and then we'll go to B20, hopefully many, many years before everybody else. I did mention this is legislated, so here are just a few of the laws governing biodiesel in the fleet and in buildings, but this is a matter of law in the city. One thing we're very excited about, because it took us 5 years to do it, we finally started using, and Sprague is supplying the fuel, B50. We wanted to kind of up the blend in the fleet side and use B50 in fleet. And when I was at Parks, we used B50 in a number of different projects. But that was before the EPA changed the underground storage tank rules. Since then, to use above B20 for underground storage tanks, a little complicated. We've had to engage EPA, state DEC, the New York City Fire Department, the New York City Law Department, and many other departments. And it took us a while to get all this permitted and get us done, quite literally 5 years of work. And John Ells and Harris Kaplan worked with Steve and his group and many others. And DP and Jerry Kelpin, who I think is on this call, was very helpful. And we got it done. It's operationally been very successful, and we used the first half of our program in the last few months. We'll go back and do it and finish up in the spring. We'll write a report, and it's a potential pathway for increasing biofuel use. And thanks, of course, to Parks, who's using the fuel. We are using bio tires. We are using soy-based tires, and that's been going very successfully. We've been using them at 4 major agencies, and the police department's been leading the way. And obviously, PD vehicles are used, pretty strenuous use. And if they can use bio tires, anybody can use bio tires. I don't think what most people are doing in their cars matches what the police use and functionality. So that's been a very successful initiative. And then Joy and I think others and Steve talked about renewable diesel. So renewable diesel, unlike biofuel, which is B5, B10, B20, a little bit of B50, right? Renewable diesel can be a full switch out fuel, right? RD95, B5, RD80, B20, depending on the mix, RD100. And so we did a pilot in 2019 of a little less than 1 million gallons. It was very successful. No compatibility issues on underground storage tanks, no compatibility or warranty issues on vehicles. It's the same spec as regular diesel. So there really aren't, I mean, it's obviously a different fuel, different color, different environmental benefits, but a full switch out potential. So as we know, almost all of this is used in California now. California has a low carbon fuel standard. We are hoping to see New York State adopt a low carbon fuel standard. That's clearly going to be critical both to bring the supply to New York and to create a cost parity, right? So we're paying more to be an early adopter for renewable diesel. We're happy to do that now. I don't think we could do that forever. At some point, we need the marketplace to emerge and develop and have lots of suppliers and to have cost competitiveness. California is achieving that through the low carbon fuel standard. We all know there is work on that now in New York State, and maybe it had a good week, I think. Things change quick, but I think it was a good week in the low carbon fuel standard kind of conversation in New York State. So we really would be enthusiastic. We created a case study on this topic with the Clean Fuels New York Coalition. The link is there. I'll send this out and you can take a look at that. Certainly, the core of this is environmental benefit, right? So both biodiesel and renewable diesel have really great greenhouse gas scoring in terms of carbon intensity and the production of these fuels. That is critical to achieving our greenhouse gas goals. There's a lot of interest, and especially in the environmental justice community, who we are regularly talking to, in the air quality issues and making sure that there's no slippage and that anything we're doing is positive on air quality, partly why zero emission electric vehicles are top of the list, because you don't have the air quality issues at the vehicle tailpipe. So that's something we're always monitoring and making sure, both on biodiesel and renewable diesel, that there's a strong and positive argument. And we encourage everyone to stay focused on this issue, because while the greenhouse gas thing I think is more generally accepted as very positive, the air quality is certainly high on the agenda for what people are concerned about who are engaged in these issues. And that's our slide deck, but I just want to say we've had a great relationship in program of using biofuels. We are very interested in potentially expanding it. And, if we could get to a place where it's electric, hybrid, and then where we use fuels, it's all renewable diesel and biofuel. That's really the place we want to go, right? We want to go to an all electric fleet, and we're committing to that. But what we really want to do is get out of fossil fuels first. And we have the ability, maybe within even a short amount of time, to be able to get out of fossil fuels. And then as we go to all electric, then that'll take care of itself. So just want to thank you for having me. Good to see you all. And I'm happy to take questions later, and wish you all, of course, a great holiday.
Oh, Stephen, you're muted.
Steve, you're muted.
I guess I thought I was talking too much before. But anyway, Keith, thank you very much. Thanks for the presentation. Thanks for pioneering these products well, as in a lot of cases, the anchor tenant or the organization who could set the way for others through the purchases and the experience. And yes, as we move to electrification, biodiesel, renewable diesel is a unique transition fuel to get us there for the heavy duty and medium duty applications. And thanks for hanging around, Keith, to take some questions later on as well. Our next presenter also doesn't need an introduction in the biodiesel and renewable diesel fuel circles. Jill Hamilton started her own business, Sustainable Energy Strategies, back in 1997. Jill is up to date, and anybody wants to know anything about funding for biodiesel industry and renewable diesel now, whether it be incentives, for infrastructure, or for equipment, Jill is the go-to person. So Jill, floor is yours.
Thanks, Stephen. Hopefully you're seeing my slides now, and I loved hearing what Keith had to say, and appreciate all the support you're giving us. I'm here, as Stephen said, I'm Jill Hamilton, President of Sustainable Energy Strategies, but I'm here on behalf of the National Biodiesel Foundation. Has been a big partner with you all over the years, the National Biodiesel Board. And the foundation has helped to secure some of the initial grants and funding for some of the projects, funding opportunities I'm going to talk about today, including B100 projects, which we aren't going into a lot of detail in today, but there are some options such as Optimus Technologies, basically a heated tank and heated fuel lines that allow vehicles to run on B100. So note that when I reference that there are some vehicles that are running on it. So I'm going to highlight about 6 or 7 opportunities. And the main point of my presentation is there's plenty of funding out there, especially now. It's with these recent bills, we're going to see it actually increasing. So please reach out to me or some of the team members on this call if you have any additional questions. First one I want to start with is the EPA DERA program. The Diesel Emission Reduction Act of 2010 authorized EPA to provide up to $100 million annually for projects to reduce emissions from diesel engines. Last year, EPA distributed about 46 million nationally and 26 million through state grants. Last year, they announced the solicitation December 9th. This year, they've said that they're going to delay it because of the continuing resolution, but usually they give you about 2 months to get your application in. So now's a good time to be thinking about whether or not you have some vehicles you want to apply for DERA funding. And it's important to know that the National Biodiesel Foundation, in partnership with Optimus REG and several fleets, including Iowa DOT, DC DPW, DC Water, have been successful in securing DERA grants for B100 vehicles. And you can also use it to do diesel replacements and put biodiesel in it to B20, but we're really looking to try to increase the amount of biofuels we're seeing in the marketplace. As it stands now, to use DERA funds with the B100 system, you must purchase a new vehicle and add the system, similar to adding a plow. You know, it's just part of what you include in your invoice. The Optimus system will be needed to be included on that invoice. No retrofits right now for existing equipment are eligible to do that B100 system, but we're hoping that will change in the near future. There are some changes as of 2020 under the DERA program. So vehicles must be replaced. If you're replacing a vehicle, it must have at least 3 years of useful life. And that doesn't mean that your fleet, in your fleet necessarily, could be over the life of the vehicle. Most municipal fleets sell it to the community, auction it off. And so we're looking at most heavy duty vehicles have a life of about 28 years. And so the vehicles must also have criteria of about 7,000 miles per year or 500 hours for off-road vehicles, at least the prior 2 years before retiring. And DERA applies to a variety of vehicles, as you see here, and we've successfully targeted the heavy duty class 5 through 8. One of the unique things about the DERA program is you are targeting emissions reductions. This particular program is looking at health effects as well. And they don't have really an application for B100, so you are allowed to use a different emissions calculator. And we've used the National Biodiesel Board's emission calculator that's shown on this screen to add our GHG emissions reductions. Joy mentioned 86. This is old data, so you could argue that that's higher, but this emissions calculator is generating them at 76, which isn't including some of the new additions that have been made to GREET and other things, but I won't go into details on that today. DERA match, we're looking at a vehicle replacement. So you're providing 75% of the cost as a fleet and you're getting 25% of the cost as a grant. Or if you're doing the drainage vehicles, you can do $1 for $1. And so if you're looking at a $200,000 vehicle, you could be getting as much as $50,000 for replacing that vehicle, retiring it early and adding the Optimus system, which it ranges anywhere from $13,000 to $16,000, $17,000, depending on the vehicle. And I love this slide. This is looking at if you were to replace in this case, we're looking at a B100 refuse hauler versus an EV refuse hauler, what the emissions would be and the cost effectiveness. And there's a lot that goes into this slide and it's a little bit detailed, but basically if you look at your PM emissions here, because the vehicles, a new diesel vehicle costs about $200,000, a refuse hauler, maybe you add the Optimus system, you're looking at $220,000 compared to very conservatively $500,000 for an electric vehicle refuse hauler. Now those figures don't include the operating costs, but based on the life cycle, the life of 13 years remaining, biodiesel competes significantly with your health effects. So I wanted to just point it out, just because I'm not disparaging EVs here at all, and the cost will come down, but I do want to make the case that the biodiesel is able to compete with electric as well. Last week, the HBIP program, the Higher Blend Incentive Program, was announced by USDA that they have $100 million available through the CARES Act. This, for those of you who are in the biodiesel industry, know that there was funding available in 2020. They are renewing this funding. And we haven't seen the solicitation, but that's expected. And in addition, we're hearing under the Build Back Better that there will be approximately $1 billion to continue this program. So in addition to the 100 million, we think that once Build Back Better is passed, we aren't hearing that this is one of the items that's in contention. So we expect it will remain in that bill. Hopefully it's passed in early January at the latest. All right, so grants in the past, these HVIP grants can be up to $500,000 and dollar for dollar match. We think that under Build Back Better, that might bump it up to as much as 75% of the infrastructure costs. And there are two types of projects: transportation refueling, that's your fleets and your retail stations, and then there's fuel distribution facilities like Sprague. They're looking at their terminals and more your middle marketers. So take a look at that. If you think you might have some terminals or retail stations or even refueling facilities at your own fleet, consider applying for these funds. FTA transit funding. FTA has billions of dollars of it for infrastructure development. There are about a dozen different transit incentive programs, such as capital investment grants to assist with refueling infrastructure, or the Accelerating Innovative Mobility, or AIM, to support advanced technologies, including this Optimus B100 system that I mentioned, as well as other biofuel infrastructure incentives. I know several transits that have successfully used these funds or for similar projects. And if you're interested in doing this, please come talk to me and I'd be happy to explore looking at it for a higher blend infrastructure project. DOT RAISE is another one. There are dozens of port funding opportunities. The RISE program targets ports, freight transport, goods movement, and infrastructure. And for fleets that deal with ports and freight, this is a perfect opportunity for your region. It usually closes in July, but it's funded annually. It's a perfect time to begin the discussions for that. There's also environmental justice is now a high we're all hearing about environmental justice. It's now a criteria under most of the federal transportation programs. And you need to take this into consideration. And when promoting biodiesel and B100's ability to cost effectively reduce air quality emissions, you saw my slide earlier, projects that address environmental justice do not have to have any matching funds under the RISE program. But you do have to have a 20% match if you don't include environmental justice activities. So keep that in mind. And they also define rural. They have a 50-50 split between urban and rural, and their rural definition is different than USDA's. Their rural definition at DOT is 200,000 people. So I know that's probably not going to work for maybe you all in New York City, but if you have any members who are outside that region, that might be something for them to consider. All right, the ferry program continues to increase in funding every year. And this one closed in October, but it's an annual program. And we're expecting to see more funding under this. When talking with DOT about this, the ferry program, they indicated that biodiesel projects would be considered innovative and highly competitive. So again, would love to talk to you if you're interested in exploring that. CMAQ program, I think you're all aware of this. Several of you, the Clean Cities coordinators, have successfully accessed the congestion mitigation air quality program. And we have discussed using, basically you have to work with the state implementation plan to make sure that your project is worked into those. So it's a time consuming activity, but I'm hearing from many states that they're looking at, even though this is federal, it goes through the state, they're looking to double the funding under this program or significantly increasing it, and they're looking for projects. So it is competitive, but when looking at competing with bike lanes and rails to trails, these dirty diesel vehicles, getting them off the road is a very significant emissions reduction, and they're now starting to have to really quantify their emissions reductions under this program. So please keep biodiesel in mind. I mentioned that CMAQ, but also there are several federal programs that, even though they have a national solicitation, they also have funding that goes to the states. DERA is one of them. I mentioned that earlier. CMAQ, the Volkswagen money, the RISE program. It's all federal money that is given out, apportioned at the state level. And a lot of these different programs, those are some state examples of how they're using them. Please work with your state energy offices to connect with them to see what their deadlines are for some of these programs. And I've put up the resources. I'm not going to go over them, but because we don't have time, but I just want you to know those links are in here. And I am available if you ever have any questions or would like more assistance on any of these funding opportunities, particularly for biodiesel and renewable diesel, but most of them do not apply to renewable diesel because you don't need infrastructure modifications for it. And I think that's it for me. Thank you.
Jill, thank you very much. And there's definitely a lot of financial assistance and funding available in many different applications. So thank you.
Yeah.
Next up, Joy's going to come talk about some of the bio-based products. A lot of people think about bio-based product as just, biodiesel, but it's not. And it's in a lot of products that we use every day, and whether it's in lubricants or chemicals or tires or turf. So Joy is going to give us an overview. Joy?
All right, thanks, Stephen. So I'll go through these really quickly, just so we have some time for questions, but these are just a few examples. Like we discussed earlier, there are a lot of new ways to use soy-based products that are coming to light each year. So we're excited to see where this industry goes. So the first, as Keith mentioned earlier in his presentation, some of the soy-based tires that they're using. Goodyear has produced these tires that use soybean oil, which means they are reducing the amount of petroleum-based oil that is used. And mixing soybean oil is a lot with rubber is a lot more energy efficient, and so it improves manufacturing efficiencies. It's also the soybean tires, the soy in the tires also allow for more pliability and grip of the road, especially in cold temperatures, and improving distraction when the roads are wet and snowy. And we have that issue quite a bit here in the Northeast. Another really cool bio-based product that is being piloted in some areas of New York City now is the Port Shield concrete durability enhancer. So this is a soy bio-based concrete enhancer that is mixed in with the concrete itself, and this can be used for concrete that's laid on the ground. So we're seeing a lot of great use cases for concrete that's under salt piles that's used to salt our roads. It tends to be a lot less corrosive. It also can be mixed in with concrete that's used in building, so it can help sort of limit some of the particulate matter and harmful dust that gets kicked up by concrete during construction. It's non-toxic. It's made from renewable, sustainable soybeans. So again, back to supporting local farmers. It also can be applied into very cold temperatures down to 2 degrees Fahrenheit. So great for cold weather applications as well. There is some asphalt and turf applications as well, some soy-based asphalt sealant. There is also soy-based turf and fake grass. So that's great for playgrounds and even your lawn if you'd like to be more sustainable and not have grass, a lawn-based grass, which is, particularly an issue in some of the areas that have drought. And then finally, bio-based heat. So using biofuels in replace of regular traditional heating oil can help substantially reduce greenhouse gas emissions from buildings, which is one of the biggest source of greenhouse gas emissions in New York State. So that's it, and I will kick it back over to you, Stephen, to moderate the Q&A.
Thank you very much, Joy. So I have a couple of questions and that have come up, and I think Joy and Rita, or would one of you please tell everyone about if they're looking to obtain some funding, what's the process?
Sure. So if you have a project in mind, or you're looking to dive a little bit deeper into some of the great opportunities that Jill mentioned, you are welcome to reach out to Rita or I, and our contact information is right there, and it'll be shared with the slides after the presentations. And if you're not in our Clean Cities region, then we are happy to direct you to a Clean Cities coordinator wherever you're located, and we can help identify some of the funding opportunities that best suit your needs, and make some of the connections to potential suppliers, and kind of give you an unbiased review of how to get to where you need in your fleet.
Thank you, Joy. And let's remind everyone, if you have a question, please put it in the chat box. But Keith, could you share some of the results on the renewable diesel demonstration project, and basically how did it compare to regular diesel and/or biodiesel for that matter?
Okay, sure. One, we use about 950,000, maybe a little bit more gallons of renewable diesel. We use it during the warm weather months. So we haven't tested renewable diesel yet in the winter, but we're confident that that will work out. We're probably going to be a leading implementer of cold weather renewable diesel. We used it in a whole mix of agencies and trucks of age and make and model. I mean, we didn't do anything to limit where we used it. So we didn't say we only use it on new trucks or this type of truck. We used it across the fleet. Operationally, at the underground storage tank level and the fleet level, like I said before, there really was no issue of any at all. For the most part, operators, other than the fact it's a clear liquid, wouldn't have known we did it. There were no follow-up maintenance, operational concerns really of any type. So it was fully seamless. Based on the carbon intensity scoring that we required by the contract, you have about 60-65% greenhouse gas benefit. So you're getting, that's a pretty big move on the greenhouse gas side. And so, yeah, I mean, the benefit of renewable diesel over biofuel, and obviously we've been a huge and enthusiastic user of biodiesel. But the reality is that, having the same spec as regular diesel, not a different spec, which a different ASTM, which biodiesel has, you don't have to worry about these compatibility issues in the same way. We plan to use, as you know, some renewable diesel with some mix of biodiesel, even if it's 5 or a smaller percent. We think that's beneficial to do. But yeah, really at an operational level, at an operator level, at an equipment and maintenance level, there was nothing to report. There was no impact of any. It was seamless. The big challenge, as so many of you in this call know, is building the marketplace, right? Is the cost level. It was more expensive. It was $1.25 more, for that project. And so it's building the marketplace, bringing a low carbon fuel standard, bringing in more suppliers, getting, some kind of cost parity. That's the real challenge. I think fleet operators are going to love the fuel because you don't have to really worry about it. You're not doing anything different. Whereas biodiesel, which we've had a great relationship with, obviously there is a little bit more of a maintenance and regulatory challenge because it is a different spec.
Thank you, Keith. Thanks very much. We're coming on, or on at 3 o'clock. Joy, do you want to give a closing statement for us?
Sure. It looks like we have one question. Does everyone mind hanging on for a little bit so we can ask it?
Sure, go ahead. Yeah.
For light duty vehicles, ZEV is the goal, but if it's not available, would vehicles that run on B20 be preferred over gasoline powered vehicles?
Well, I'll take a little stab at that. We did what we've done on pickups and vans, right? We haven't done this on light duty. And there have been we've had some conversations about should we bring in diesel SUVs? But the hybrid electric market has been moving pretty quickly on light duty. So we have not done that. We have done it on pickups and vans. We have gone to literally hundreds and hundreds of diesel pickups and vans, and the city operates over 7,000 pickups and vans in total. And so to be able to get the benefit of renewable diesel and biofuel and the DPFs, right? It's not just, it's also the diesel particulate filters, right? So to be able to get the benefit of renewable diesel, biofuel, biodiesel on pickups and vans, as well as hybrids. I showed you a picture of the garbage truck, but we also have these XL hybrid pickups and vans that have diesel particulate filters and the required emissions reduction at the tailpipe and are being used on B20. So we did make that move in pickups and vans pretty substantially to do that very thing. I will tell you, we did not do it for light duty. The feeling on light duty was that, we did not need to make that change to diesel because the models on plug-in electric and hybrid are there.
Thank you, Keith. Joy?
All right, so I just want to say thank you so much for joining us today. Again, if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out. If it's not only just about biodiesel or renewable diesel, we are happy to talk to you about anything we can do to help make your fleets and your transportation choices more sustainable. We recommend that you sign up for our newsletter, sign up to be a member, and stay overall engaged with your local Clean Cities Coalition, be it Empire Clean Cities here in the city or RETA in Long Island or anywhere else in the country. So thank you again, and look out for the recording and slides following the presentation.
Thank you, Joy. Thank you, Stephen Levy and Sprague, for always giving us the support.
Have a good day, everyone.
You too. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.